Thank you, Lucy. Thank you for that introduction. I'm sure I didn't write that. And thank you to the Mining Club for inviting me along. I actually sat down the other day and said, I do remember being here. It's probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I think I spoke about the Dubbo Rare Metal Project, and that's not a subject I'm going to drift into tonight, other than to say it's amazing how that industry has morphed in the last 20 years from what we consider to be a special metal or specialty chemical business, and now it's called critical minerals. And it seems like half the periodic table to me these days is a critical mineral. So anyway, I'm going to give you a very high level overview of our Boda Kaiser discovery, which is a very, very big gold copper resource. And I said, as you'll appreciate, in the last 4 years there's been a lot of time and effort put into it to get it to where it is today. Hopefully. There it is, okay. All that stuff. I think the thing that I'd really like to stress though is the bottom line. You know, these things are not individuals. There's a number of people that have worked on this project from start to finish, and they've all contributed significantly to what is we consider to be a global significant discovery. So a little bit about the Macquarie Arc. The guys asked me to talk about Macquarie Arc and Ordovician porphyry systems, and I said, well, 15 minutes is not long enough. I probably need about 50 hours, but I'm just going to give you a short snapshot. So the interesting bits on that map, so you can see we're in the central west mostly. The green stuff is the Ordovician oceanic arc, the preserved oceanic arcs. And it's quite unusual to have Ordovician-aged rocks preserved to such an extent where they are relatively intact and relatively visible. You can see them without being smashed up totally. They are bound, mostly bound by sort of north-south structures along their margins. And the other little interesting things are those little dashed lines you can see heading from northwest to southeast. And these are transverse cross-arc structures, which are very common in big porphyry systems globally. And I think these are worth noting. And they're a lot more than they used to be. People only used to talk about the Lachlan one, which is the one down through Cadia and up to North Parks. And now we recognise a whole host of them scattered around. It is a world-class province. So let's start with what we came into the industry with, and as far as porphyries are concerned, I should have said that if I quickly jump back. Try to. No, doesn't matter. Oh, yes, we do. So in the left centre of that, you can see the town of Tomingley, Peak Hill to the south and Dubbo to the northeast. Tomingley is a project that we've been working on. It's got a gold mine. It's been operating now for 10 years. When we started out, it had a 4-year life, and currently we're in the process of extending that out for another 10 years to probably about 2032 via some very innovative work that's been done on that project. And the total resource there today from go to wire is probably about 2.5 to 3 million ounces. So it's a nice orogenic type gold deposit. So back to porphyry. So this is the little cartoon on the left is borrowed from a Newcrest presentation few years ago, and they tried to compress, and I thought very well, the types of porphyry systems you see in the Macquarie Arc. The pencil porphyries typified by North Parks on the left-hand side, very narrow, tight alteration systems, and then on the Cadia Ridgeway systems on the right-hand side where you can see very large extensive areas of alteration. And I won't go into all the detail about the geochemical signature, but that's put together by the University of Tasmania and the Codes Group. And it shows you how you can zero in on these porphyry targets by starting out at some quite distance away from the ultimate source of the material. So on to us and what we call the North Molong Porphyry Project. It's always been a mouthful, and I've always been trying to find something other way to call it, but that's what we're stuck with. And the left-hand side is the aeromagnetic map, and you can see the dashed lines being the what we call the Hunter transverse zone going through the middle. And then on the very southeast is where Boda and Kaiser are, and the magnetics really demonstrate the existence of lots of different intrusive phases in their magnetic deposits. On the right-hand side is a structural map, and it's very busy, and it is very busy, but we've recognised now the last 3 or 4 years that while you have these big alteration systems, what makes an ore body is the structural control, the structural location and driving of where the mineralisation gets focused into. And I won't go into try and explain that map, but that just shows you can see on the bottom where Boda is on the map, it's a very structurally complex area. So on to Boda and Kaiser. So what we've done since about September 2019, we've drilled something like 200,000 metres of drilling, mostly core and RC, and it's been focused on that 3.5 kilometre corridor you can see on the map on the right-hand side, Kaiser being the northwest area, and then Boda down to the south. And really we went in and drilled some geochemical anomalies in areas where we'd actually had some shallow RC holes, and it got interesting mineralisation, nothing you'd consider economic. And then we started looking and saying, well, we think we're at the top of the system here. We basically need to be deep. We need to go in and drill some deep holes. And you can imagine, you know, a junior resource company the size of Alkane, you start talking of kilometre holes, and you're talking about $250,000, $300,000 for a hole of that dimension. So we've started off doing that, and we've kept going. And before anybody asks me, we've spent about $50 million over the last 4 years on developing Boda and Kaiser. And again, the model, and the reason I put it up, it is, again, it's a cartoon. So we're trying to synthesise a lot of information into this little slide. We're dealing with a basaltic andesitic alkalic volcanic system. We think we're at the core of a volcano, and there's a very large alteration system. It starts with a pale green. It's a propylitic, outer propylitic alteration, which is just altered material. A little bit of pyrite, and then you slowly come in towards the core, towards the centre zone. You go inner propylitic, and then into the calc-potassic cores. And what we see at Boda and Kaiser are these monzonite intrusives. Most of them aren't very big where they come through the system, but they're very distinctive, and they very much, you can see that they are the heat engine and the chemical engine that drives this mineralisation. We initially started off thinking we had a Acadia model. We thought this is a Acadia type model. As we've gone on, we now don't use those terminology anymore. We now use the Boda model because it's different. It's not exactly like Acadia. People often ask us, you know, is it similar to Acadia? The answer is no, it's not. Apart from the fact that it's a very large volume of copper gold mineralised rock, it's a different type of system. If we zero in on Boda, so there's the southern body. So at Boda, that red line outlines the actual resource, the identified, inferred and indicated resource that we have there. It's over a kilometre, it's probably nearly a kilometre and a half, north-south. In that central north zone, it's probably close to 700, 800 metres wide. It's a very, very big system. And the cross-section, again, very difficult to simplify these cross-sections, but what you see there is the green being the volcanics, or propylitically altered volcanics, the orange being the sort of monzonites, and the calc-potassic alteration. And then the mineralisation, if you look really closely, you'll see different zones of mineralisation. And it starts off being disseminated pyrite, chalcopyrite, scattered throughout, and then it slowly becomes more concentrated. And if you can see it in the image on the right is one of the breccia zones that we we drilled, and that was nearly 100 metres of nearly 4 grams gold and 1.5% copper. That was a pretty spectacular intercept. And the more we got into it, the more we realised that these things are not huge. They're not huge. They're not North Park sized. They are quite lateral extensive and vertical extensive, but they're quite narrow at the same time. So they're not big systems, but they add to the overall grade and tonnage of the deposit. That zone, by the way, was 1.1 kilometres of, as you can see there, nearly over 0.55 gold and 0.25% copper. Very big. And the other little bit of interest in the bottom is we have on the eastern and northeastern flank of the alteration zone what we call a phyllic zone. And this is just pyrite mineralisation. It's got amazing gold. No copper. It's amazing, it carries gold, and you can see that intercept there. It's 400 metres of 3.3 grams gold. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you put it all into the context of this total resource, it adds significantly to it. Kaiser is, again, probably the same. It's the extension of the same system, the same alteration system, but appears to be deeper. So we see more high temperature mineralisation, we see more bornite in the system there, and you have to look very, very closely at that top image, and you can see some bornite scattered through that rock with a lot of chalcopyrite. Very impressive hydrothermal breccias. Again, same sorts of very high grades over relatively narrow intervals. And being a geologist, I had to throw in the bottom one some of these monzodiorites, those little pencil things I was showing you. There's one that tops out in one of the holes in Boda, and we get these meriolitic filled vesicles, and what that means is that basically you're near the top of the monzonite. So you're getting all the gas and fluids that are coming off, exolving off these monzonites, and that's a very good indication of where you are in this very, very big system. There's a long section, so again, it's a cartoon in some ways, but tries to summarise what we're seeing. And you can see there, Boda's a very distinctive vertical, it's not a pipe, but it's a sort of circular focused zone of mineralisation. It's about 1.2 kilometres long, or deep rather. We've drilled it to well over 1.2 kilometres, it's still open at depth. We've got further mineralisation to the south into what we call Boda 2 and 3, and there's another higher grade patch developing at depth in Boda. And that's probably going to be about year 300 in the mine before we get to that. So, and then fortunately, Kaiser, as I said, being a deeper system, and it actually comes right to the surface, and you can see all those high grades that sit in that block. It looks a bit like a pipe-like structure. It's, again, not really, it's just a focus and concentration of the mineralisation, but that's plunging to the north. And Kaiser certainly is a very early open cut potential. You love putting up these great tables, and I won't even try. I think the thing to notice is that the total resource on the bottom line, it's nearly 900 million tonnes, 0.37, I think it's 0.37 gold, 0.31 gold and 0.18 copper. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I'll show you a thing in a minute which puts it into global context, that the reality is that it's a very significant resource. And if you really want to have a hard look, look at the little bit on the bottom. It was published by Newmont about a month ago. It was their resource update, and it was for Cadia, and it was all the underground. And if you look very closely at their grades, they're not too dissimilar to what we're quoting overall for Boda and Kaiser. The diagram's on the right, that says the Boda. We've broken Boda into two parts. There's a 0.3 gram cut-off and a 0.4 gram cut-off, and the 0.3 we believe will go into an open cut type operation, then the 0.4 will become potentially a longer term underground. We haven't quite done that for Kaiser right now because we're just finishing the drilling there now, and the new resource model will probably be out by the end of early April probably. And it looks at this stage that Kaiser is probably going to be bigger and probably higher grade than what we originally thought. So I threw up these little bubble things to try to show you what a comparative porphyry system, the deposit. So the size of the circle is the volume, the tonnage. The grade you can see along the bottom is copper, and the gold up on the left-hand side. The slightly pinkish ones are Australian deposits. Obviously Cadia dominates that table. And then the green ones are international deposits. And I will point out the two on the top left, Treaty Creek and KSM, are in British Columbia. That system, they're two companies, but if you combine them, they currently have a resource total of over 100 million ounces of gold. Now, these are big, big systems. When you look at some of the aerial photographs of it, you think, isn't it great to work in New South Wales? You've got nice rolling green hills, you don't have mountains and glaciers. Some of the drill sites at the KSM deposit are drilled from a glacier into the deposit. I imagine the technical difficulties that would provide. So going back in the brighter orange in the middle there's the Kaiser, Boda Kaiser body. This is prior to the upgrade that we're going through right now. So you can see grade-wise it's pretty close to Cadia. The deposit underneath, North Island, is an operating mine in British Columbia. The one on the left is also an operating mine in British Columbia. So these deposits are mined, and these grades are mined. So metallurgy, obviously very important. We've done one fairly big stage one run through, and it was surprisingly simple. Very standard crush grind circuit, flotation, simple flotation to produce a concentrate. The recoveries were sort of nearly 90% copper and probably over 80% gold overall, and it produces a very clean concentrate, extremely clean concentrate. It's in fact, the guys working on it said it's one of the cleanest concentrates that they've worked on. It's better than, probably, I'm getting carried away saying it's better than Cadia's concentrate in terms of grade and content. So that's all going on. We're currently working, we've got an engineering group put together a plant design. They're costing it at this time, and they're doing the operating and capital costs. And hopefully that study will be out sometime, probably maybe late April, the way it's going at this stage. looking at all the other infrastructure, local infrastructure, power, water requirements, etc., land requirements, and all the baseline environmental data as well underway. So, a little bit, outside of the Boda Kaiser area, which is that going down the very bottom right hand of that image, there are numerous other targets. And I won't go through them all, but there's a lot of targets. We can now rate those targets according to their geochemistry, the lithochemistry, the style of rock, the alteration of that rock, and there are multiple targets. We've just completed a gravity survey just late last year. It's being interpreted now, and there's going to be some really interesting things come out of that, and we're just not in a position to release it just yet. But it certainly shows up to how significant that 20 kilometre long northeast trending zone going from Boda and Kaiser down in the southeast, right up to the thing we call Murga and Finns Crossing into the northwest. Just an aerial shot of the site. As I said, nice place to operate. Drill rig sitting in the middle of a wheat crop. Rolling hills, and our biggest impediment's probably a wind farm which sits right over the top of the project site. But that's another story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Look, it's always an absolute honour to hear from Ian directly, but we will take questions now if anybody has a burning question for Ian. We do have some roving microphones if you need it, but look, maybe I'll start with one while you're all warming up, and that is why New South Wales, Ian? For somebody, and obviously with Alkane's long history in New South Wales, why did you come and why do you stay?
Well, I'll give you the factual story, not the fairy story. Basically, when I first got involved with Alkane, the guys approached me and they said, we've got control of this company, we don't know much about it. They inherited it by doing a swap with an oil company that they had, and said, would you go to New South Wales and spend a few weeks there and come back and tell us what you thought? So I spent a few weeks roaming around. I just kept being overwhelmed, what I saw as the potential. And our initial targets were obviously orogenic gold, because that was our background in WA. And I went back and I said, guys, if you have got the guts and the focus to come in to be in New South Wales and you commit to being here and you commit to putting a good team together, then I think the company could be very successful. And that's sort of how it evolved. There's been a few glitches along the way, but it's a bomb.
I think never has anything been more correct. Thank you so much for that, Ian. We do have time for a few questions. Are you sure? Nobody? Okay, no problem. Oh, thank you. One down here in the front. Thank you, Kerry.
Ian, thanks. Great presentation. I know Alkane's been around for a while. Lots of news flow coming up. But from an investor point of view, just give us I guess, a view of what's the news flow and why we should potentially get involved now with Alkane.
I guess there are two things, and this is about Boda Kaiser, so I glossed over Tomingley. So Tomingley, the new discoveries we made south of Tomingley about 3 or 4 years ago are now gone through evaluation. We bit the bullet and we did something that very few companies of our size have done in the past. We ran a decline from our Wyoming 1 open cut at Tomingley, 3 kilometres down to the top end of the system at Roswell. And the reason we did that was because we thought it was probably going to be a fairly long, drawn-out approval process, because the Newell Highway runs right across the middle of everything. And we thought, well, we can probably get permission and approval to go ahead and mine underground. And the really great thing about Roswell is it's a very high-grade deposit. And we put out an updated reserve statement about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and on it we were showing zones of mineralisation which are plus 5 grams scattered all through the Roswell deposit. And Roswell will come on stream, physically come on stream as a mine within the next month and a half. So, and of course, having the decline there, we just whip the ore out straight through the Tomingley plant. So that's one big thing that's happening, and that'll scale up Alkane production to over 100,000 ounces in 26, and we can see another 8 years past that. That's without finding anything more. As we found at Tomingley, we've now taken Tomingley down to about 400 metres, 500 metres vertical depth, and we keep finding more ore as we keep going. It's a classic orogenic gold deposit. Outside of that is Kaiser, more drill results to come out on Kaiser. In the past, in the recent 6 months, putting out spectacular gold copper drill results has almost meant no market reaction whatsoever. Total ignore. I think maybe that's changing, but we will be putting out those results. We'll have a revised Kaiser resource within, say, 3 weeks. That'll go into the global total, and then people will start to realise what a big system that Boda and Kaiser is. Following that, about another month, and the preliminary economic study is done, and we'll demonstrate to what the project is worth. And I think I'll explain now before somebody asks me the question is, you know, are you looking at a huge scale operation, which means huge capital costs? And yes, we are, but we also looked at the deposits, and we can see ways where we can scale down. So you can start with an open cut on Kaiser at a smaller scale operation, and then you just scale it up over time as it becomes successful. You have the plant, you will build the plant such that it can be expanded. So that's the sort of, that information should come out within the, let's say, another month, a month and a half.
Thank you. And a last question up the back here.
Ian, very interesting talk. The granite intrusives into the Ordovician age volcanics, what's the age of the granite? Is that also Ordovician or younger?
The monzonites, the mineralised monzonites at Boda and Kaiser have been dated around 440 million years, which puts them exactly the same age as, say, Cadia. So it's the same system. And, you know, when you look at these, you look at the chemistry, the lithogeochemistry, that all that work we've done on it, you can classify them. We classify them according to that as to where they fit in our exploration profile. So things that don't stack up in the wrong rock type, the wrong chemistry, we probably give a lower priority to explore. But they are classic monzonite, as distinct from the granites. We've got a huge big granite to the southeast of us called the Walluman granite, which is a carboniferous granite. Very different beast, totally different. Not like the monzonites that we see in the Boda Kaiser system.
And have you looked at the Badangara deposit, gold deposit just to the north?
Yeah, that was actually the first thing we did. When we acquired, and I didn't talk much about the history, but we acquired the property off Rio Tinto in 2004 or 5. I can't remember, back a fair way. And the motivation initially was orogenic gold. You know, given our background at Tomingley, we thought there was potential for orogenic gold. We thought Badangara was an orogenic deposit. And so we had a good hard look at it. We drilled 20 or 30 RC holes into it along strike and got absolutely next to nothing. So it's not always successful. But at least it taught us something. It taught us something on the back of that disappointment. We said, well, we've got this property. It's got lots of indications of being monzonite, porphyry, intrusive bodies and mineralisation. The old Kaiser mine, for example, outcropping mineralisation. So we went back and started from scratch and then just built up the story, drilled targets, finally zeroing back into the Boda area, and that's in 2019. I'll call it the discovery hole, but it's being a bit stretch the truth a bit.
Okay, look, thank you so much, Ian, and please thank Ian again.